I'm going to start in the middle. I want to say that for the record. I'm not going to pretend I figured it out the morning Dad died. I knew. I knew for years. My parents were married for 36 years. They met in college. They had 2 kids, me and my younger brother Daniel, and they did the things people do. Mom worked in HR at a regional bank. Dad sold commercial insurance. They had a house in a Cincinnati suburb that I won't name, with a finished basement Dad spent every weekend renovating because he didn't like the way Mom decorated upstairs. The affair started, as far as I can reconstruct, when I was a junior in high school. I noticed it at first because Mom got a new phone. She had carried the same flip phone forever. She used to make a joke about how she couldn't figure out the smart ones. And then one summer Mom had a smartphone and started leaving the house for evening walks that lasted exactly an hour and 40 minutes, like a movie. The man was someone Mom worked with. I learned his name later, Greg. I never met Greg. I never wanted to. When I was a sophomore in college, I came home for a long weekend, and I borrowed Mom's car to go see a friend. The phone was in the cup holder. I picked it up to check the time, and the screen lit up, and there were 3 messages from a contact saved as Sandy that were obviously not from a Sandy. The third one said, "Don't tell me you couldn't get away. I held the room until 8. I read all 3 twice. I put the phone back down. I drove to my friend's house, and I sat in the driveway for 40 minutes before I went inside. That was 2014. I never told Daniel. I never told Dad. I never asked Mom about it. Not once. Not in the 11 years between then and the morning Dad's funeral home called me to confirm the casket order. The thing about a secret like that is it doesn't sit still. Every Thanksgiving for the next 8 years, every Christmas, every birthday, Mom would hug Dad in the kitchen and ask how the basement was coming. And I would watch Mom's face, and I would know what I knew, and I would say nothing. I told myself a story about why. Mom was lonely. Dad was withholding. Their marriage wasn't my business. Daniel was too young to handle it. Dad was too proud. I had no proof, only screenshots in my memory. If I said anything, the family would split. If I said nothing, maybe it would burn itself out and they would get to the other side, and the affair would never need to be named. It didn't burn itself out. It lasted, as far as I can tell, 11 years. Dad died in January. A sudden heart attack at his desk on a Wednesday morning. He was 64. The funeral was on a Saturday. The Sunday after, while Mom was at the church for some women's lunch, Daniel and I were cleaning out the basement, and Daniel found a folder labeled financial records that Dad had been keeping for years. Inside, there were copies of bank statements showing money Mom had been moving for years into a joint account with a man whose full name was on the documents. Greg. Daniel sat down on the basement floor. He held those papers. He looked at me and he said, "Did you know?" And I said yes. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then Daniel said, "How long?" And I said, "Since college." Daniel set the folder down very carefully on the floor next to him. He stood up. He walked upstairs and out the front door, and I heard the car start. I didn't see Daniel again until the next morning, when he came back to get his bag, and he didn't speak to me, and he hasn't spoken to me since. That was 4 months ago. Mom doesn't know that Daniel knows. Mom doesn't know that I knew. Daniel calls Mom every Sunday like nothing happened. He just doesn't call me. I keep telling myself Dad died believing his marriage was real, and that's the gift my silence gave him, and I should be at peace with that. Some days I almost am. Most days I just want my brother to pick up. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments.